Hello again, everyone. You're joining us for another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint podcast series. My name is Jeff Mix. I'm head of content and research. My guests today are Laurent and Pascal. They've just given a fantastic keynote presentation here at the Biomanufacturing World Summit in San Diego on the topic of leadership at the peak performance. And then they very generously agreed to do a follow-up podcast. So there is going to be a link to their presentation in the show notes below. But in the meantime, I would love to have a further conversation about this. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Can we start off with the two of you actually introducing yourselves properly? What is the context that brought you to give the keynote, and what it was sort of the source of inspiration for why you gave your talk today?
Sure, I can start. Pascal Bécotte. I'm managing director at Rossi Reynolds and lead our New York and Canadian businesses. My expertise is in biotech, vaccines, manufacturing and supply chain. And so I've been an attendant and a speaker at this conference for several years now, generally trying to zero in on the global talent trends in the industry so that we can prepare for the future. In that context, with Mike Kmark a few years back, we identified a generational gap in the talent, meaning there's not going to be enough senior leadership ready for the top jobs in a few years. And therefore, we created an accelerator program to try to push hypo leaders to learn in 3 days what would normally take 3 years to experience by assembling a group of top knowledge holders, so the specialists and the professors and the universities about some subtopics. But then we brought real experience to anchor that knowledge into stories that could be told. Laurent was that person for disruptive technologies, and leveraging them in peak performance organizations, and so that's how we got to speak about this in that program last summer, I believe, here in Brooklyn. And Alison Moore thought it would be a great thing to bring Laurent to the conference to do the same.
Absolutely. And would you care to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Laurent Rossi, former CEO of Alpine, a car manufacturer that also has an F1 outfit. And I guess I intervene, as Pascal said, in the context of like describing peak performance, leadership and management. On my end, I was also interested in discovering practices across all other industries and the automotive one. So for me, it was great as well to be here and listen to other leaders such as Mike McDermott and the rest. And I guess it's a fantastic learning experience for everyone today.
So I know one of the things that makes this such a natural fit is, biopharmaceutical manufacturing is at the point of experiencing revolution. New modalities are coming to market, and we are inventing how to invent these things as we go, which does sort of parallel some of the experiences in F1 racing. Why don't we talk about that a little bit? The idea of being able to benchmark across industries, but everybody is trying to be excellent.
That's the secret sauce that we're all looking for right now, the recipe to the secret sauce, essentially. And I don't know if you would agree with this, but my perception is that the leveraging of those disruptive technologies, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and so on, is roughly a decade ahead of what it is, or it seems to be in my eyes, in pharma and biotech. So that's a little bit of the angle here was to try to decode a little bit what happened in the automotive industry. Laurent was at Google prior as well, so like he literally was ahead of automotive as well in so many ways. So that would be my first comment on that topic. What would you say?
Yeah, I agree. Because connectivity and data started to enter the automotive world a long time ago as an extension of your phone, if you will. Right? People wanted to be connected the same way they are to their phone, sadly or not, every day, all the time. We had to basically adopt or be an early adopter of those new tech, even though it was a wave that was coming at us. And it's not only on the product and services, it's also within the divisions in the organization. So manufacturing, for instance, is a great place to learn, test and learn with AI and machine learning, because it will improve your supply chain. You will improve the quality of the products that you build. It would help reduce downtimes and all that stuff. So we basically had to adopt that quite early on. But then it's always difficult to move giants like the automotive OEMs. It's like 100-year-old, most of the time players that can only go so far in terms of like disrupting themselves. And this is why I started looking outside and discovered the likes of Moderna that have decided to basically turn the model on its head, right? By using AI and data at the center and wiring everything around it, which is the best practice that everyone should follow. So it's fascinating because we were a bit early to the game, but we're not necessarily the fastest or the best. And it's really impressive to look at what everyone is doing in their own corner of the world, because we're all going to converge towards more or less the same thing at some point. At the end of the day, my belief is that it's going to be a big organizational challenge and leadership challenge, because you're going to need to build or rebuild for most companies everything from the ground with data at the center, and teams and people that used to not talk to one another. They're going to have to discuss, agree on which data they're going to share and which model they're going to build together so the organization is competitive. And that's a managerial leadership challenge as well.
Well, I'd love to expand upon that a little. I think one of the things that your organization, well, not your organization, your movement is trying to do is get leaders ready for the future. And that future is going to be increasingly technological, which doesn't mean we can leave the people part of it out of the conversation. What is sort of the goals of shaping how leaders think and interact and educate themselves to remain on top and achieve that peak performance that you're looking for?
There is a foundational personality and set of skills and values that cannot be developed, right? I can take a piece of metal right now and try to bend it, and it just won't. And we can take a piece of softwood, and we're going to be able to bend it a little bit, and then we can take a piece of soft plastic and be able to bend it a lot, right? So first, we need to understand within each leader how much potential, let's call it that, how much potential they have for change, for development. And there are tools that are also being developed right now to try to test true potential. Once you have that, the key to one's ascension, if that's the right word, to the C-suite or to even the CEO role, which I'm going to describe as the leadership development journey. Ultimately, obviously, not everyone wants to be CEO or will be CEO, but let's say that was the ultimate destination, becoming a CEO of a Formula One team. The key is to be able, on some dimensions, to understand the context enough to know when you should be on your strategy, let's say, pragmatic and just go for the low-hanging fruit, take your wins, and don't take too much risk, versus disruptive and take the chance and bet the ranch. And those are two strategic attributes. But the leaders that are extraordinary at this are the ones that are able to recognize in the context where I need to make my decision. Do I need to be very pragmatic? Or same thing on the leading team's perspective. You can be humble and vulnerable at one end, or you can be heroic at the other end. And you see this in history where, for example, Winston Churchill was a heroic leader. He was extraordinary wartime. He was incapable of moving to the other end of the span and being a good peacetime prime minister or leader. He always wanted a battle. And that's where he was living. He wanted to be the heroic guy. So Steve Jobs, extraordinary at reinventing multiple industries, but Steve Jobs had his mansion built in Hawaii, and the main room where he was hosting people was without furniture for the first 2 years because he couldn't find furniture that was perfect enough for his perfect design house. So people, literally, important people will come and sit on the ground with him in the main room to have some of those conversations. So he was amazing at being disruptive, but not very pragmatic at the other end, couldn't recognize that context. So that's why he was good to Apple for a period of time, not great for a period of time, and then good again when it needed to reinvent itself. So that's the journey, is that we call it leadership span. The ability to span from one end to the other on 4 dimensions is today what we think is going to be the journey that we want to take as many biotech manufacturing leaders on, so that we can stretch the span and teach them how to recognize the context in one way or another.
Oh, nothing to add. The expert here.
It's a great point. Something you said the other day that I really thought was interesting was the idea that sometimes the decision is made by the senior-most person, sometimes the decision is made by the person with the best technical understanding of what's happening, and part of being a leader is knowing who gets to make the call when. And I wonder if we could talk a little bit about that within the context of peak leadership.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think a decision, if it's made alone, most of the time is going to be a wrong decision. I'm pushing it a bit here, right? They are, like Pascal said, and we didn't talk about that, but I was interested in it. Like there are moments where you low-hanging fruits, easy decisions, you can make them. There are moments where bigger decision, strong decision, you will end up making a decision, but it's going to be an informed decision. So it's going to be a decision, you're going to call the shot because you're the most senior person in the room, or you're going to sign your name at the bottom in case something goes wrong, but you make the decision collectively, and you make a decision taking into account all of the voices that know whether or not this is a very well-informed and effective along the line, like at the end of the day type of decision. So for me, a decision, if it's made alone, it's a danger. That's how I think about it.
You made me realize that in our conversation there during the presentation, where I never thought of it that way, but when you explained how when you watch a Formula One race, sometimes you can hear the engineer ask the pilot, how are the tires? Is this a good time to pit? And in my mind, I always associated that with the pilot has ultimate decision power to do X, Y, or Z. But then you corrected me and you said, no, that's the engineer getting one more data point. There's a lot of other data points. And in that case, I suspect the engineer ultimately, or whoever makes the call.
Yeah, I mean, unless you have this extreme situation where the driver say, I cannot drive the thing anymore. And in that case, there's no need insisting. But even in those moments, the engineer who has way more information around how the tires, for instance, behave in the other teams or on the same car with your teammate, are the data, what is the story that data tell you, because you have tons of like sensors everywhere. So even in that case, you can even say to the driver, this is normal, this is okay. You need another few laps, and perhaps the tire will come alive again, or in a few laps we'll pit. But basically what we're trying to get from the driver is an educated piece of information, because he's a sensor too.
Okay.
So data might tell something, the rest of the field might tell something. It's a lot of like input to your decision. And then the driver will give the last input sort of. And so it's I think it's a very good metaphor for you make a decision with all the right input. If you make a decision alone, you might end up like making a big mistake. Because you don't have all those important information.
It must have been that kind of context I don't recall if it's the last race or 2 races ago, where Alpine, the 2 drivers went, it was a bit of a contrarian decision to the rest of the field.
Yeah.
They stayed out, they did not pit, and they were able to go to the end, and that was a double podium.
Yeah.
It must have been a hard contrarian decision to hold and to make.
I don't know. I'm not going to speak like for this type of situation for many reasons I can't, right? But I can tell you that yes, sometimes it is, because it happened many times for all the teams. But sometimes it's actually an easier decision to make than the rest, because when you know, for instance, that you're slow, and I'm not saying that they were, I'm just saying there are cases where all you can do is basically hope to benefit from specific conditions and event that's going to happen. And it's actually factored in the way you think, right? It's again another type of like decisions, but informed by other decisions. When you get into the race, everyone knows that there's a safety car probability, so a probability that you're going to have like an interruption of some sort of the race. And that's factored in the way you think. So if on top of that, your car is fast or slow relatively to the field, that also informs the way you will think about it real time. And you're like, I'm assuming, well, we're not incredibly fast, we're well positioned, we could actually be winning the jackpot by staying in, especially since it's raining, it's equalizing performance, so it ends up being more of a driver type of capability contest more than anything else if we maintain them on track. Not saying that was what happened, but I would say knowing a little bit the people there, it would not be surprising that that decision was made in like conscientiously, because they were pretty good at that actually.
I wonder if we could talk about your ongoing project, which I know you've been speaking at for a number of years, to address this leadership gap. And I can see that there is progress. Obviously, we are now bringing in examples and experts from outside industry, but how are things progressing? How should companies get involved? How can the industry work together to address this problem collectively? It is a big topic, and I know there's always updates. Where are we in this?
You called it a leadership gap. I'm going to be more precise and call it a generational leadership gap, meaning in most functions, in most industries, the talent distribution from an age perspective, so thinking of retirement, is a bell curve. And you have 15% of your population, typically the ones in the senior most roles, that are at a tail end or one end of the bell curve. And you have young talent that's incoming, and that's going to be developed over time, and that's coming out of university. That's at the other end, the other 50%, and the majority, 70% of your people are in the middle of that. That's the majority of your population. In our industry, in biomanufacturing, it is not bell curve, it's U-shaped, because there was a game-changing new technology in the late 70s, early 80s, biotech, that emerged, and there was no continuity of talent. The chemical engineer with just an undergrad from the years prior did not have the qualifications, the PhD in microbiology, to lead a biologics manufacturing process. So there's an entire new start to a generation of talent. So U-shaped, a lot of people are now in their mid to late 50s and will be retiring, but without the talent behind them or enough of them to take those senior most roles. That's why we need to accelerate them. So I think the encouraging first step was taken last year. And what I mean by that is hypo leaders from different companies were sent to Brooklyn, locked up in a boutique hotel over there, and went through a leadership development program, the kind of stuff that you can't get from ChatGPT. It was best knowledge in the world combined with best experience in the world, storytelling. I like to use that analogy that the human brain is not a good data processor, it's a good story processor. So when you get data, you need to anchor it with stories, and then they can retain it. And the striking part of this is, it was not easy when you think about it for companies to send their hypos to a program like this, and therefore, like we all know who those top 20 people are. Yet they sent them because they recognized the need. And most importantly, the likes of Mike McDermott, Alison Moore, Laurent Rossi, Philippe Lusca, I call them the Obi-Wan Kenobis, the wise Jedis of our industry, came to teach their best tricks, like authentic leadership that we just listened Mike talk about, for free, on their own dime. No one is getting paid to do this because they know the talent needs it. That's a Mike K. Mark legacy. So year one was done. Every company that participated in year one is sending people in year two. But we need to keep the group to maximum 24 people. And so hopefully over time, we're going to have 100 young talents that will have that connectivity to the Juan Andres and the Alison Moores of this world, so they can solve problems faster. And more importantly, they have each other now as a cohort of hypos to help solve problems as they come. It's all about the patient.
Absolutely. So I guess maybe to wrap things up, I'll say for people who have been listening to this and want to get their own organizations involved, what is the touch point? How do they say, this sounds like a great idea, I've got high potential candidates who maybe could put themselves through this process, or maybe there's a way to do it geographically or by industry. Maybe aerospace also has a need for rising talent to get some leadership training, and they say, can we benchmark off what you're doing? What is the way to open doors of communication?
To be frank, we were launching the V2 of this program here at the conference, and so stay tuned online on my LinkedIn profile, for example, or in the Russell Reynolds website.
I would love for you to tell us a little bit about the V2 version of this.
V2 will be in Switzerland. It's going to be in June. Why? Just to allow the travel to New York for some of our European participants last year was a lot. These are really, really busy leaders. So we've decided essentially Russell Reynolds to hold it in Europe 1 year and then the US the next year, and alternate this way to give a chance to everybody to participate. I'm not going to divulge the full lineup from a faculty perspective, but we're gunning to find the top industry people to join us, but also the top academics and experts about some subtopics that are important at that moment in time.
Well, I guess maybe where I want to wrap things up for now is saying, obviously this is an ongoing thing, but it's exciting. It's amazing that you're already making progress. And would I be right in saying people who are interested in learning more or getting involved, this is something that on an ongoing basis you will be updating us, and they can also get in touch with you if they need to?
100% correct. And thank you to Executive Platform for having us.
Absolutely. Well, I'll let the two of you go. I really appreciate your time today, but I think this is an exciting and important project, and I look forward to updates. Thank you both.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
You've been listening to another episode of Executive Platform's Blueprint podcast series. I've been Jeff Mix. Let's do it again soon.